Hey guys, welcome to a review of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the second, which I'm late to the party with this one. I know it took me a while to see this movie, but let's cut to the chase here, direct to you. So I come into the movie. I'd heard mixed things about it. Not the unanimous praise that I usually hear with Marvel movies, but not like bad stuff either. And at first, it's kind of meandering. Like the movie starts. You've got some generic villains, some weird, angry gold people that are just the most generic villains. You've got kind of like weird sporadic plot lines that don't seem like they're leading anywhere. The character humor is not quite as sharp at the beginning, although Drax got a lot funnier. I'll talk about that in a minute. So things are kind of, I'm like, alright, well this is, I mean it was fun, but it's kind of like, what's going on? What are we building to? And then the real interesting stuff starts happening at the end of the movie, and it's kind of difficult to talk about this movie because I can't talk about the most interesting part of it without spoiling things. So I'll have to kind of talk in general terms now, and then talk spoilers in a little bit. But so let's talk about the things that I can't talk about. There's several plot lines going on. Obviously, one is Star-Lord. So basically, first they flee from the Gold People because the Gold People are mad at them. The Gold People are very generic, but kind of funny in a way, and just like how generic they are. Like I feel like they're generic on purpose almost, because there's a greater villain than just the Gold People. So that kind of makes them seem like they're kind of generic on purpose, just to kind of set things up, almost like Marvel knows they have some weak villains, and they're just like, alright, well here's this generic villain that you think is going to be the main villain. But anyway, so they run away from the Gold People, and then they kind of split up. Like, Star-Lord's dad shows up, and he's like, hello son, my name's Ego, I'm here to help. And so Star-Lord, Drax, Star-Lord, Drax, and Gamora go with Ego and his friend Mantis, who's the lady with the antenna that's in the trailer. They go with him, while Rocket, Groot, and Nebula, who they've captured. I don't remember exactly how they captured her, but I just remember she was on the ship. See, at this point, like, there's not a lot going on to the story. Plus, there was probably a camera in this glare. So they find Nebula, and so Rocket, Groot, and Nebula stay back, and they're trying to fix the ship. And while they try to fix the ship, Yondu shows up with his men to attack and bring them back to the Gold People. But things go wrong because Yondu's team starts a mutiny, and then Yondu and them get captured, and it's the start of they go through a Yondu like redemption arc, which I have mixed feelings on. I really like the character stuff, like just showing off Yondu, because he's a cool character. Yondu's the blue dude with the like mohawk thing and the little arrow that he controls with the mohawk thing, which I didn't realize that's how he controlled it until this movie. But I like the character stuff with him because he's a cool character, but they try to like put this backstory on him involving this group called the Ravagers or something, and they never really like properly explain it. They put a lot of expositionary dialogue about this Ravager thing and his backstory, but it never quite like makes sense. It's a little too like weird and alien. Like the first scene he's in, he's at like a club or something, and Sylvester Stallone shows up playing someone. I still don't really understand who his character was, and is like mad at Yondu because he broke Ravager code or something, and the whole scene made no sense. Like, they get mad, they have a confrontation, the gold people show up and ask Yondu for help. The last part was the only thing in the scene that made sense to me. I'm like, why are they fighting? Who is Sylvester Stallone? What is he doing here? What's going on? It didn't really make much sense. And then they kind of try to explain it more later, but it still just doesn't make sense. And every time Yondu starts expositionizing about his background and such, I'm just like, okay, we don't need this. You can show us that Yondu is cool. You don't have to tell us that Yondu is cool. Like, I think the writers underestimated how much we might already like Yondu as a character and be willing to accept him redeeming himself, because they like really tried to like create a backstory and just make up all these like ways that he's not so bad and it's just like, okay, chill out. And there's actually a connection to that in the spoilers that I'll talk about later. So back to the Ego story. Basically, they go to Ego's planet, and you find out Ego is basically a god. Like, he created his planet, and like he wanted to have human form, and he went down and to Earth and hung out with Star-Lord's mom, and then had a kid. And yeah, I mean, it's more interesting than it sounds, but again, we're already reaching into the territory where I can't talk that much about it because spoilers, in fact, I think. Well, let me talk about some of the elements that kind of stand separately from the story, because what really works here, again, just like the first movie, is the characters. Gamora and Star-Lord kind of build their romantic thing without actually having a romantic thing, and there's some funny dialogue revolving around that, where Star-Lord's like, are we gonna make this unspoken thing between us like a thing? And she's like, it's not a thing. And then he makes some analogy to like Cheers, the TV show, which I feel like I hear a lot of analogies to that show in movies, but like I don't actually know it. There's also a great little running storyline where Star-Lord wishes his dad was David Hasselhoff. Well, he told Gamora a story about how he would pretend his dad was David Hasselhoff, and so there's a lot of like David Hasselhoff jokes in the movie. There's a lot of David Hasselhoff jokes in like the movie industry. Like, he's become like the symbol of like 80s celebrity. Even though he doesn't even really act in anything. He just kind of like appears in cameos. I think the SpongeBob movie actually started it with the whole thing where they're on the beach and then he shows up and he's like, oh, I'm David Hasselhoff, and then they ride him back to Bikini Bottom. But yeah, there's some of that in this movie too, and that's a funny gag that also kind of connects Gamora and Star-Lord. And then meanwhile, Drax sort of forms a bond with Mantis, the antenna lady, and it's kind of an opposites attract thing, because he's like, he like doesn't really show emotion, and she's like all about emotion. She can read people's emotions by touching them, as you see in one of the trailers. But she helps Ego fall asleep, and like that, she's kind of like his servant. And she's interesting. She's funny in that she has a weird kind of way of talking, like a kind of accent, but it's not really like an actual, like, it's kind of just a weird like inflection thing where she's like almost like she's not quite sure how to talk in the English language, and it's pretty amusing. Paired with Drax, who honestly is the movie's standout funny character for me. First movie, Rocket and Groot were comedic highlights, but in this movie, I feel like they try a little too hard with the Rocket Raccoon humor sometimes. Like there's way too many like long bits of him giving like a comedic monologue that is supposed to be way funnier than it is, and they also kind of turn up the dial on his assholiness a little bit. I mean, not like to an unlikable amount, but just to an amount that makes it not quite as funny. There is one really great scene with him and the leader of the of like Yondu's mutinous crew, where he makes fun of the guy's name, which I'm not going to spoil because that's the whole joke. What's going on out there? But I feel like they try a little bit too hard with the Rocket humor. The Groot stuff is mostly like cute humor. Gotta sell those toys. But God, that's distracting. Okay. Anyway, where was I? Let's just talk about spoilers now. Well, overall, I thought the comedy wasn't quite as good in this one. This movie is really good, but it's not as good as the first Guardians of the Galaxy, which I mean, isn't saying much because the first movie, I think, is still my favorite Marvel movie. That is, like, they haven't made one better, in my opinion. So it would have been hard to top that. But this movie does get really good. I have to give it the third act. It's one of those movies where the third act is just, like, outstanding, and everything else before it kind of, like, straddles a little bit on the way to the end, third act, which I'm now going to talk about. So if you don't want spoilers, click off. Okay, so as you probably guessed by now, Ego is the real villain of the movie, which, I mean, wasn't an entirely unpredictable thing, but I wasn't sure if that was the route they would go with it. So I kind of like, and at first he seems like a really nice guy. Like they don't really give a lot of. The first sign that he's up to something is that Mantis is acting kind of like she tells Drax that she wants to tell him something, and then Gamora shows up and she gets dodgy about it, and Gamora is like suspicious. She's like, is this person really who he says he is? What does Mantis want? And so she kind of tries to find out. And then the other, while this is going on, there's Rocket and Yondu and Groot are trying to break out of the rebel group. Nebula's kind of teamed up with them, and they gave her a spaceship to go hunt down Gamora. Her arc is, I mean, it's kind of boring. Like, it's weird because it seems like she's the character that would need more of a redemption arc than Yondu, but they really focus on Yondu for the redemption arc rather than Nebula. Like, she's just kind of there for a lot of the movie. Which is a shame because the actress is really good. What's her name? I don't remember, but she played Amy in Amy Pond Karen Gillan, yeah. She played Amy Pond in Doctor Who. So, and she's got a lot of, like, she's very talented. But so they're trying to break off Yondu's ship, and that's where, like, there's some really funny scenes with that, but it's kind of like Yondu's backstory, and it's kind of, and then in the end, Yondu ends up sacrificing himself for the team, although it doesn't really seem like he had to that much. Like, I feel like there's a way they could have gotten him out of it, but then it's blatantly clear that the whole redemption arc was just so that he could die at the end, which kind of seems like a waste of time to me, especially since afterward they have this big, like, space funeral for him with all these fireworks and all his old Ravager buddies show up and Sylvester Stallone's there, and it's just like, this is like after all the conflict has been resolved, and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, you spent so much time on weird expositionary dialogue that I still, like, I believe that Yondu's a good guy, but I still don't completely, like, know his character. I'm not attached enough to his character. So I feel like they kind of failed in that regard. But on the contrary, here's something they really succeeded on. Ego is great. Marvel has been getting better with the villains. Ego is great. I've heard the Vulture in Spider-Man is great. I haven't seen Spider-Man Homecoming yet. So no spoilers. But Ego is great. The slow build of his villainy is pretty great. He has some really fun scenes, but he's also just like really villainous. It's one of those kind of interesting like god character given too much power, doesn't know what to do with his power, and gets bored, so he decides to like wipe out life. I mean, it's similar to a couple. It's similar to some other games I've played and such, but I mean it's a fairly predictable storyline, but just the way they do it is really good, and I think it's Kurt Russell playing Ego, but let me look it up. Hold on. Ego. Got my computer right here. Played by Kurt Russell. He's a very interesting villain. And like the slow build on him, where he seems like a good guy, and he teaches Star-Lord how to hone his like god-like creation powers, but then in the end, turns out Ego wants to destroy all life on Earth, and he's going to use these little pods that he planted on different planets, which the pod is first shown in the very first scene, which is like a 1980 flashback scene. He uses those pods to, and of course they show the pod that's on Earth to kind of connect you to, like, oh no, Earth. But there's pods on like all the planets, including the Gold People planet. They show that one a little bit, but like he's Ego the living planet basically, and he's like, and so then they end up fighting like a planet, but there's some really cool like as Gamora is like slowly figuring out what's going on. There's this really dark scene where she and Nebula stumble upon a cave just filled with like skulls and bones, and you're like, what is happening? And then they keep cutting back to like Ego's monologue, and and this is where Kurt Russell really sells the like god-like portrayal of this character, where he's constantly like rambling in monologues, and they're kind of expositionary, but they're expositionary in a way that works, unlike the Yondu stuff. But one moment that really I really liked, that I didn't expect, was, so Ego is talking, and he's like, so this is my master plan. I've been trying to recruit. I've had children with women all over the universe. Tried to find, and you're the first one that has had the power that I needed to help me with my plan. And I need your power, so please help me, son. He kind of puts Star-Lord in like a trance of seeing infinity, eternity, whatever, and and that's what all the skulls and bones are. That's revealed. It's like bodies of his children. But then he starts talking about Star-Lord's mom, and how he loved her mom, Star-Lord's mom, and he couldn't go back to Earth anymore, or he might give up his plan to be with her. And then he casually reveals that he was the one who planted the brain tumor inside of Peter's mom's head. And there's a great moment there where Star-Lord just instantly snaps out of his little trance thing that he was kind of like uneasy about before, but just like as soon as he says that, as soon as Ego says that, he just pops out of his trance, pulls out his guns, yells, "You did what?" and just starts firing at Ego. And then it's all, from there it's like battle. And the battle is really cool because they're flying into the planet. The little the scene with the tape and the bomb from like the first trailer is actually in this final battle scene, the final act. The Golden People show up to just add more chaos, which I couldn't help but laugh when they showed up. I'm like, oh god, these guys again. And as just a really solid, well done third act, some nice music cues. they use that one song. I don't know the name of the song, but it's like, "They ain't gonna love me now if you never love me again. Break the chains and I break the chains." I don't know, but I really like. But they use it and they're like fighting in the planet, and it's just fun. It's a lot of fun. Ego's like shifting forms between the human form and like crazy planet face form. It's just a really good final battle sequence, and it kind of ties everything together because Rocket and Yondu and all of them show up and help. And finally, like these two separate plots kind of merge. Nebula's there because she tried to attack Gamora, and then Gamora saved her, and then they kind of made an uneasy peace. And it's just a really solid third act. It's just a really solid third act. Really great third act. Really put the movie together for me, because before it was kind of a mess. But the ego storyline is the meat. All the Yondu stuff is fun, but it's not like the meat of the story. The meat of the story is Ego and his like sort of arc, which is I'm not gonna like detail it because it's a lot of like him monologuing about it, which should be a bad thing, but like he sells the monologue, and there's also like he uses like visuals and stuff to kind of explain things, so it's not completely telling and not showing. A lot of it is on the actor. Kurt Russell does a great job as this god living planet character who's just kind of like bored, and so he wants to take over the universe, and he's like lonely, so he wants to be with his son, but he's destroying the universe, so he's going to be more lonely. But it's kind of it's just an interesting arc, and I'm really glad that this is the first Marvel movie where the best part of it, the most standout part, is the villain. And you can't say that about any other Marvel. I think Loki's pretty great in like. I liked Ultron too in Age of Ultron. I thought he was a big part of my like for that movie, but nowhere near like he wasn't the standout quality factor for the movie. So would I recommend Guardians of the Galaxy 2? Yes, I would. It is definitely worth seeing. I'm assuming, it's the kind of thing where I don't really even have to recommend it, because if you're interested in the MCU, you've already seen it, probably. And if you're not interested in the MCU, you probably aren't going to want to watch this, because it is the sequel to another movie in the MCU, so you're not going to know any of these characters. You would want to watch the first one first, which I absolutely recommend. Even if you're not wanting to get into the Marvel Cinematic Universe just in general, watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movies at least, because they're pretty disconnected and they're both great. The first one is honestly a space classic. Like, I feel like years from now, when the MCU is like not a thing anymore and people are kind of over the whole superhero movie trend, people are still going to go back and watch Guardians of the Galaxy, because it goes beyond a superhero movie. It's like a Star Wars caliber, and this is a pretty bold thing to say, but I honestly think Guardians of the Galaxy is like a Star Wars space fantasy epic that people will watch for generations to come, like a classic, a modern classic. But and this one doesn't quite have the same, it's not quite the same kind of modern classic, but it's still a really good movie with a really great villain that I would recommend you see if you've seen the first one and are at all interested. Arrivederci!